We will discuss about triggers, why we need, what is triggers, uh, different context variables which we have and we use, and how to decide when to use before trigger or after trigger, because that is the big challenge for the developers when they start learning to decide whether they should use before trigger or after trigger and what all scenarios can be there. We will write couple of examples and we'll also talk about the recursive triggers or recursion, how to prevent that if we have any. Okay, so let's understand the triggers. So like what is trigger? So we use triggers in Salesforce when we want to maybe like automate some process and maybe want to pre-populate some values on any object and want to apply the validation. So trigger are the event based. Triggers execute on the basis of events maybe before and after depending on the DMLs which we perform. So let's say if we are performing any DML, we are maybe inserting the records, deleting the records, or updating the records. On the basis of those, our triggers will execute. Means you don't need to run triggers specifically. You don't need to call any method or anything in that. But whenever you will maybe modify any record or create the record, trigger will call automatically depending on the certain conditions which you put. Okay, so let me create one trigger and we'll explain that in detail. So and what scenarios can be done, like let's say as I said, if you want to apply the validation means, let me go to there. So we will apply one validation in trigger. Let's say on account we want to keep industry mandatory. Industry should be mandatory on the account object. Okay, so if you see there are n number of ways for the validation part, but you can use maybe the custom validation you can put, or you can put the standard validation as well. So we will put not like a standard validation, but we will put validation through the triggers. Okay, so how to put that, let me show you. We will create one trigger. Let's say in account industry validation. We need to choose the account, like let's say which account. So we will apply it on account. What we will do, we will make the industry field mandatory. Okay, so how to make that, let me write the logic. Submit. So syntax is trigger account industry validation on account before insert. So that is like the before insert trigger. Let's understand whether we should use before or after. So when we talk about the same object, whether we are going to populate some details, some data, and or we are going to put some validation. So let's say if you want to make industry mandatory, then we need to check it whether industry field on account contains any value or not before we actually commit the record. Means when you will click on save button, before you commit the changes to the database or you insert the records to the database, we need to check prior to that. That is the reason we will use before trigger here. So a part of that, before I move into this, we have certain context variables. Let's talk on that. The context variables and the trigger events both. So if you talk about trigger events, we have before and after. These can be changed, maybe like before insert, before update, after insert, after update, before delete, after delete, or after delete. These are the trigger events which we can use or we use when we create any trigger or to fulfill any kind of condition. But events will be either before or after. DML can be insert, update, delete, undelete. So we'll simply put like before insert, after insert, before update, after update, before delete, comma, after delete, and last one is after undelete. Undelete, delete. These are the events which we use. I will use several events today, and let's talk about the context variables. So in the context variables, we have like trigger dot is executing, trigger dot is before, trigger dot is after, trigger dot like is insert, trigger dot is update, trigger dot is delete, trigger dot is undelete. There are some more. All along, trigger dot new, trigger dot old, trigger dot new map, trigger dot old map. Okay, so these attributes will return you either false or true. For example, it will give you the context like from where your trigger is being called. Maybe your trigger is being called from the via page, because from the via page as well we insert the record or we update the record, and whenever we insert or update the records, our trigger will run if conditions are met. Another thing is trigger can be called from web service, trigger can be called from the anonymous block. So these all these variables which I have written here will return either true or false. So this is the nature of these attributes or these context variables. So we can identify whether like in what mode our trigger is executing or our trigger is running. Let's talk about the trigger.new. So trigger.new will give you all the records of new versions. New version means like when you insert the record maybe first time or you update the record, then when we insert the record and if we use trigger.new, it will give you all the records, means list of new records which you are inserting. Trigger.old will give you the old version of records where if let's say if you are updating anything, okay, maybe on the account you have created any record and by mistaken you have chosen the industry maybe agriculture and you are supposed to choose it banking, then you can take the old data from with the help of trigger.old. Trigger.new map will give you the new version of records id in the map. Trigger.old map will give you the old version of records id. So in map, when we talk about either new map or old map, we will get the ids. When we talk about trigger.new or trigger.old, it will give you the list of records, either new records which you are either updating or inserting, or the old record which you are updating, but before update what was the actual value of the records. You will get those in the trigger.old. So let's talk with an example here. So I will use some context variables so that you can see how to use these attributes. So let's say trigger dot is insert, means we are making sure our block of code should run only in the insert case, and trigger dot is update. Okay. This is the context, means I'm making sure our trigger should run in case of insert when we are inserting, or not is update is before, in case of before. So we are making it sure that trigger should run when we are inserting the record data, and context is before, means before we commit to the database. Now we will check on the account. So let's iterate for account obj acc account. As I said, trigger.new. So it will give you the new version of records, means all the new records which you are inserting first time, or you are going to insert. So here I will check the condition. If obj account dot industry, let me use the method of string dot is empty or is blank, means I will check if industry field on account is empty, then I need to put the validation. So here when I will try to create any record, and if I see I am not putting any value in the industry field, it should return one error. So let me show you before I make my change or save it, what will be the output, and once I activate my trigger, what will be the output. Okay, so go to the account. So let's create the account. Provia, I'm putting the name. I'm not opting anything in the industry field, so industry is none or blank. Okay, let me save it. I'm able to save the records right now. Okay, but what I want, if I activate my trigger, no one should be able to save the record with blank industry. Now I have to add the error. How we can add the error message, let me show you. On the account record, and on that particular field we will add the message dot add error. Industry is mandatory, please select a value. Simple, this is my error message. Now let's save it and see what happens. It's giving some error looks like here, but let it save. Okay, it's saved now. We can also check whether our trigger is active or not. If trigger is active, then only it will run. I'll tell you how we can check, but before that let's try to create some records with blank industry. You should get some error message. Provia info. I'm again not populating anything in the industry. If our logic is correct, we should get the error. Industry is mandatory, please select a value, means until I select the value I won't be able to save it. So let's select some value and try to save. Now I'm able to save it. You can see on the details. records are saved here. Okay, similarly we can populate the details in other like we can put some other validations as well. So let me brief you those. Okay, so let's put some more validation, or you can populate some values when you are trying to save the records. For example, when I save the record on account, I want to populate certain values. Means like industry should be some XYZ value, phone should be some static value. So how we can do that? I will put it in the same example. So I am checking it here. Else, let me populate some details here. Dot rating. I want like every time it should be hot, and phone number, let's say it should be something, any number you can add of 10 digits or 12 digits, it will work. So this time when I will save the record, if it pass the validation, I will have some default values here. So let's try to do that. Click on new, add the name Grovia Information Technologies. Okay, if I click on save, as I have added the validation, I won't be able to bypass it right now. Let's put it something, some value. And all along, if you see, I'm not adding anything, I'm not giving any value to the rating or phone, but when I will save the record, I will see the details, see the values here. Let me show you. You can see the phone here, and for the rating, let's go to the detail. Rating is hot. So whatever the values I had put in the code, I am making sure these values should populate when I save my trigger, save my record. So I'm doing certain things with the help of trigger here. I'm putting the validation, making the industry should have value, and rating should be always hot, and phone number should be this number. Let's say one more thing. If I try to create some record and populate some value to the rating, let's say rating, I am putting it cold, put some name Grovia, add the validation, I'll add the industry and save it. Go to the detail. If you see, rating is again hot here. Reason is we are making sure whenever you save the record, before that it will override the values, or it will, if let's say you haven't given the value, it will populate the value. If you have given the value and you are saving the record, it will add, it will override those values, and it's doing the same thing. So that was the one scenario. Another scenario can be, let's say when we are creating the account, the same time we also want to create maybe like 5 contacts on the same account. How we can do that? Let me show you that part. Okay, and in this case we will use after insert. Reason is, once I save the account, I want to attach several contacts to that account. That means I need ID of that account object or account record. So when we talk about ID, or when we talk about cross-referenced objects, cross objects means here we are going to create certain contacts and will attach to the account. So there are two objects, and we also need the ID. Until you save the records, you won't get the ID. So we need to save the records. After that, we will get the account ID and will attach to the contacts. I will add one more event here. That will be after insert, and again I will put the condition if trigger dot is after and trigger dot is insert. What I will do, I will iterate again. So let's do the same thing. Okay, let me create one list of contact. So I will use this list here, but before that, I let me add certain contacts. So for example, right now I will add one contact, and you want to, if you want to add more than one, 5, 10, 20, you can iterate in the loop. So let me instantiate the contact object here first, and let's populate the values. When we create the contact, last name is mandatory, means you really need to provide the last name. Dot last name. So I will take the last name from the account itself. Like account name should be our last name here. And how we will attach this contact to the account, I need to assign the account ID from this account, and I will get the ID in case of only after after insert. Let me add this instance to the list. Dot add, we have add function, and I will now insert this here after the loop. So whenever I will create any account, I will get the context. So if you see here in the related, there is zero contact. But now whenever I will create another account, new account, it will automatically create the contact. Let's say Dell, put some industry and save it. So Dell will be the first name for that contact. You can see we have got the account, and under that we got the Grovia Dell. So Grovia is the hard code value here, first name. Dell is the last name, which is the account name, and it's attached to the account. So here we got the account, and this is the contact. So you can automate certain process, even though let's say we have certain limits on the roll up summary. We can create only 20 roll-up summary in Salesforce. That is the limit of Salesforce. But let's say if you need to perform the similar action, you can create the trigger. Or another limitation of roll-up summary is you really need to have the master detail relationship, and you can create the roll-up on the master side. But let's say if you have the lookup relationship and you want to create the roll-up summary, you can go with the triggers. Another thing is, let's say there is a company, maybe IBM, and if they want to calculate their revenue, what is the total revenue, again you can write the trigger. You can do the sum from all the opportunities. You can take the amount field, you can perform the sum, and you can update that onto the account object, account detail. Similarly, there can be n number of examples which you can do with the help of triggers. You can send the email notifications, and many more. Another thing is, when we talk about best practices of trigger, as per the Salesforce rules, we shouldn't write more than one trigger per object. Means we should limit one trigger per object. But maybe like you will see in the industry, people use more than one trigger. That is not in the best practice. We should adhere the rules. Another is, try to create helper class. So right now if you see, I had put the entire logic in my trigger. This is not again the best practice. Best practice is create some helper. Let's say account trigger helper or handler, you can put any name. Put your logic in the in this class rather than trigger. How you can do that? Let's say public static void run trigger. That's the function name which I had written here. What I will do, I will be going to call my function maybe let's say not run trigger, uh, industry validation. So what I will do, I will write this logic, entire logic in this function, and I will accept that parameter here, list of account, and I will call this function from the trigger. I will pass how, you can see that is, it's the static method, so directly I can call. I don't need to instantiate the class. Here I will pass trigger dot new, simple. It will save and it will work as is. In similar fashion, I will put this logic as well in the class. So avoid writing the logic in the trigger. Put your logic into the classes and use that. In some scenarios, we get like our trigger is being called recursively. So for those scenarios, what we can do, we create some static variables, and we assign some default value, let's say true. And once our trigger is called, we will change the value to false, so that it shouldn't be called again and again recursively. So that is part of the recursive triggers. You can, for example, let's say one more example can be, you want to calculate how many contacts are there. Let's say this is the account, and there can be multiple contacts, maybe 100, 200, 5,000. You want to see the count of total contacts on the account. You can write the trigger on the contact. You can update the total contact count on the account itself. So these kind of activities you can do with the help of triggers. So that's all in today's